we need to talk about Venezuela. On January 3rd, 2026, the United States conducted a military operation in Caracas, Venezuela, resulting in the capture of Nicolás Maduro and his wife. The raid began around 2 a.m. with airstrikes on military infrastructure, including military complexes, airfields, and other targets across northern Venezuela. These strikes disabled air defenses and caused widespread blackouts in the capital city. U.S. Special Forces then assaulted Maduro's fortified compound. Maduro and his wife were seized from their bedroom and flowed out of Venezuela. I'd say this is straight out of a movie, but this is what they're gonna make a movie about, so we'll see. The whole thing brings an end to one of the most brutal dictators on the planet, and hopefully the end of a particularly horrible period in Venezuela's history. But in the days since, we've seen reaction from world leaders, from political movements.
Hands up, Venezuela! Free President Maduro!
Celebrations from Venezuelans living in exile. But in this country, he has some pretty strong defenders. Do you know how bad this guy was? Like, I get you don't like Trump, fine. Do you know who you're protesting in favor of? Let me put it this way. In 2017, about 3/4 of Venezuelans reported losing 24 pounds in body weight because of malnutrition. This guy is a violent, brutal dictator. He's arrested his political opponents and he's murdered protesters. And also the reaction of financial markets. We'll get to that. It's about oil. A lot of oil, and it's the same kind of oil we make in Canada. Let's talk about Venezuela for a moment. How it became a complete basket case, who Maduro was, and what the end of this regime means for Canada.
Caracas, the swinging city of Venezuela. Good climate, fine buildings, wide highways with plenty on them. All in all, a pretty nice place to be for many reasons.
So let's go back. Venezuela was once the richest country in Latin America.
Caracas is a good place in which to be young. With senoritas of this caliber in abundance, the young men of the city couldn't agree more.
It has the largest known oil reserves in the world, and its democratic government was once praised worldwide. But today, its institutions, its economy, are in complete shambles. It's had the highest inflation rate in the world, above 1,000,000% annually at one point, and 400% in the last year.
The government has issued some new notes. 1,000,000 bolivars is worth just 50 cents.
People have lost everything. It's so bad that not only were people eating out of dumpsters, and they are, but people are lining up to do so.
Sometimes I find chicken skin. There are a lot of things you can eat, but we struggle every day to take food home. At least we have not died of hunger.
Its murder rate is one of the highest in the world. Medicine and healthcare are virtually inaccessible. 8.9 million people have fled the country. These conditions have in the past caused mass demonstrations. In 2014, because of crime and shortages. In 2017 and 2019, after elections were ignored and opposition leaders had to flee. Even as recently as 2024, after their election, when Maduro was declared the winner amid widespread fraud. Each time, dozens were killed, thousands arrested, and Maduro's power more and more consolidated. Maduro became president in 2013 after the death of Hugo Chavez.
Now, the funeral itself ended just a few minutes ago, and Vice President Nicolás Maduro, who's been anointed to take over from Chavez, gave a homily in which he combined adulation for his former boss with defiance of all those who don't share his opinion.
¡Chávez vive! ¡La lucha sigue! ¡Que viva Hugo Chávez!
2 years later, a coalition of opposition parties called MUD won a 2/3 majority in the National Assembly. This normally would put an end to Maduro's rule. So he forced out the Supreme Court justices who were opposed to him, And in March, the Supreme Court stripped the National Assembly of its powers. Despite the mass protests that ensued, Maduro held a vote in July of 2017 to create a new National Assembly called the National Constituent Assembly, which allowed him the power to rewrite the Constitution and to replace the National Assembly altogether. This was the moment that Maduro became a dictator. The key here is that in 2004, when oil prices surged, Chavez spent billions on social welfare programs for the poor. He subsidized food and healthcare, but this was all at the cost of a massive deficit and unrestrained spending, which means that all of the programs were impossible to sustain if the oil price fell. When Maduro came to power, that's exactly what happened. In 2014, oil prices fell. Massive deficits that wouldn't be restrained by Maduro destroyed everything. All government programs effectively stopped operating. By this time, about 80% of the population was considered below the poverty line. Maduro rigged the system to keep himself in power. Maduro would set the official government rate, the exchange rate that is, in the country to 10 Venezuelan dollars to $1 US. But only his friends and allies could get access to the rate, and it's not what the currency is actually worth. In 2017, the real rate was more than 12,000 to 1 on the black market. The military, which got control of the food supply in 2017, uses this as a way to make money. They import food at Maduro's special currency rate and then sell it on the black market for massive profit. To do this, to keep a 10 to 1 ratio, they had to start printing money. In 2018, the inflation rate was 1,000,000%. This is what's called a kleptocracy. And it's where the entire apparatus of government is designed to take away the wealth of the people and give it to the government. None of this is the result of civil war or natural disaster. This is all government mismanagement from Maduro. The consequences of these macro policies have been horrifying. Lives completely ruined.
Yes, I want to tell my own story. 3 years ago, I created a campaign called SOS Venezuela because of the killing of innocent people on the streets. And the government, because of that, they put me in prison. When I was in prison, my friends are still in prison there. People that used to work with me, we have more than 400 political prisoners that have been tortured. People being electrocutized, raped, electrocuted. They put bags with excrement in their heads. And Amnesty have all this information, have published all this, and that's why we don't understand why there's so much silence from governments in the region, but also in Europe.
From the time he came to power in 2013, the United Nations, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, among the many, many others, have accused Maduro's government of human rights violations, amounting to crimes against humanity. He created the secret police that have committed thousands and thousands of extrajudicial killings. The UN itself estimates over 19,000 between 2016 and 2019 alone. I mentioned the death of protesters. 43 in 2014, 130 in 2017, an estimated 40 or 50 killings in 2019. The post-2024 election saw at least 25 being killed when police used live ammunition against protesters. People protesting fraud at the ballot box were shot and killed. There are reports of systemic torture and sexual violence. UN missions point to patterns of torture, electric shock, beatings, asphyxiation, that's strangulation, but also sexual violence including rape and assaults by intelligence agencies and security forces. These were not isolated cases as if that would make it any better. They were coordinated and directed by the highest level, including by Maduro in some cases. Throughout his time in power, he forged economic ties with both China and Russia over oil and critical minerals, all at the expense of people who saw none of its benefit. Remember garbage dumps, and of course we cannot forget his alignment with the brutal dictators of Iran. This is happening as Maduro's oil capacity has collapsed. This country has more oil deposit than any other place on Earth, yet it fell only to about 600,000 barrels a day today. After the oil collapsed and the mineral extraction collapsed, Maduro turned to selling drugs. This goes all the way back to 1999, and it's well known internationally. Maduro and senior Venezuelan officials partnered with designated foreign terrorist organizations and trafficked thousands of tons of cocaine all over North America.
Venezuelan men were arrested as more than 6,000 pounds of cocaine was found on the men's boat. That boat going northbound was located by air and marine operations and seized once they made it to the coast of Long Point.
So finally, after all of that, millions fleeing over the border to Colombia, widespread suffering, democratic corruption, and narco-terrorism, the United States said, that's enough of this, and issued an indictment against Maduro and several other officials in March of 2020.
Maduro is an illegitimate ruler, a tyrant who brutalizes his people, but Maduro's grip on tyranny will be smashed and broken.
Then, nothing happened for 6 years. Can you imagine how you would feel if the world sat by for 6 years and did nothing while your country was completely destroyed? While the people responsible for the torture, abuses of all kinds, were just allowed to continue. So, with all the major geopolitical forces at play, including China and Russia, and really significant regional pressures, the United States sent a bunch of Delta Force operators into Venezuela and brought this guy to justice. Maduro is sitting and rotting in a cell in New York, and that's exactly where he belongs. And in this country, in our streets, in our nation's capital, people are demanding his release. How does that make any sense? How does it make sense to put dictators and despots in the good column? There shouldn't be any debate about this. Maduro was a horrible guy, and there was no one willing to take him out. The milquetoast checkbox statements from our foreign minister and our prime minister, only to be corrected later, is just simply unacceptable. Venezuela shows us what happens when this radical experiment gets out of control. Now, of course, the future of a government in Venezuela has to be the will of the people there, just like it was the will of the people there to see the fall of Maduro. But this is where we should be concerned for Canada. We got to come back to the oil for 1 second, because financial markets don't lie. You see, the oil that's extracted out of Alberta and Saskatchewan is the exact same oil that is going to be extracted out of Venezuela. And the refineries that are set up in the US are set up for that type of oil. So there is one competitor with Canadian oil, and that's Venezuelan oil. The removal of the Maduro government means that Venezuela's oil reserves, the largest in the world, are going to start hitting the market once again. So now, the Americans have a choice. They can buy expensive Canadian oil or the cheap Venezuelan stuff. When Maduro was arrested, a stopwatch started. And we no longer have a choice in Canada. We gotta get our act together, otherwise we're screwed. Liberals speak endlessly about strategically vital assets abroad, while failing to secure or grow Canada's own at home. If we had more pipelines to the Pacific or to the Atlantic, or to the other markets, then this wouldn't be such a big problem. They spent 10 years talking about new markets instead of getting shovels in the ground to get the actual resources to those markets.
We can't shut down the oil sands tomorrow. We need to phase them out.
Venezuela is a tragedy, but it's also a warning. When governments abandon fiscal discipline, hollow out institutions, and punish production, collapse isn't sudden, it's inevitable. Canada is nowhere near Venezuela, but the direction matters more than the distance. Energy infrastructure and economic sovereignty determine whether we're strong or whether we're exposed. The world just shifted, and if Canada doesn't build, invest, and think big again, others will fill the gap, and we will pay the price. History doesn't repeat exactly, but it rhymes. The question is whether we're willing to listen.